Hi, and welcome to Fawns and Porter's Dream Big Block of the Month with Hoffman Fabrics. I am your host, Jenny K. Parks. If you want to know more about me, you can check out my website, Jenny K. Quilt, or you can find me on YouTube. Today, we're working on our center section, this big, beautiful flower panel that you got that goes with your kit. We have a lot to do to get it figured out. Now, I know if you're like me, the first time you worked with panels, you're kind of like, oh yeah, what's the big deal? You just cut and slice it. Sometimes panels have issues. In fact, I remember when I was first working for a local quilt shop, I had one with the panel with the Berenstain Bears in it, and I cut it, and I realized halfway through putting everything together, I cut it wrong, and I had to piece it. Oh man, talk about a heart-stopping moment. So this is a big panel, and it is the centerpiece of what we're doing. So I'm going to share with you the tricks and stuff I learned to make the panel work for you, to make it work out right. So here's, you can see it here. You're not seeing the front of it. You're seeing the back side of the panel, because I'm going to start at the very beginning and show you everything that I did to make this panel square. Now, ideally, it should be. We should have a square panel, and yours may have gotten to you and it's just perfect, and then you can just ignore a lot of what I'm saying. The first thing you want to do when you get your panel fabric here is you want to trim everything down so it's at 1/4 of an inch. So you have 1/4 of an inch of the white, okay? And then you want to measure it and make sure it's square, that you're not going to be short on one side, which I found for me, the one that I had, I was short on the salvage side. So from salvage to salvage, I didn't quite have enough fabric. It was like, it was about 1/2 an inch short. So I had to do a little bit of work. So I'm going to tell you what I had to do to get it short, to get it stretched and square. I put it on the floor. I think this part of the quilt requires a lot of floor work. I put it on the carpeted floor, and I pinned it down to the floor in the right dimensions, and then I spritzed it with water and let it dry. And that's called blocking. Quilters will do it sometimes with blocks, or the whole quilt before they enter it in a show or something. Knitters will do it. They'll block a square or block a section. And that helped quite a bit to get everything stretched and to get it just right with measurements that I could work with. Then what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure it was square. So not only the right size, but it has to be square. This isn't something where we can start at one side and cut out segments. We have to start in the middle and work our way out. Hence, the measurements starting in the very middle have to be accurate, and it kind of has to expand like that. So it's a little tricky. It's kind of tricky the way to think about it. What I did after I blocked it, and I pressed it really well after that, is I clipped it all together. You can see clips right here. I clipped it all together, matching all of the corners and the sides as good as I possibly could, trying to be very, very accurate with it. And then I pressed it. So here, so I pressed it one direction, folded it in half, and you press that crease in there. And then I unfolded it, folded it in half the other way, and pressed the crease. As you can see up here on the top, there's a crease all pressed in there. You need that crease, I'm telling you. Because since we have to work from the inside out, you want to make sure everything's accurate from the inside out. So what I did after I had this crease pressed in there is you measure it, and we're going to mark it and measure it and everything. What you want, whatever ruler is going to give you a big enough measurement, that's the one you want. You want to make sure your crease is just as straight as possible. Okay, so you take your measurement, so the first section, you take that measurement of the first section, divide it in half, and that's where I want to line it up and mark my line. I'm going to start taking some of these clips out here that are going to be in my way. Okay. And you line it up on there, and then you want to draw a line on there. Now, what I found is my first go around of doing that, I drew all my lines, and then I measured it, and it's still, on the outer ones, I didn't quite have enough. It was going to be a little shy on all of those. So what I did is I adjusted the measurement for each section by 1/8 of an inch. I took it down 1/8 of an inch, and that was it, and it worked out just fine. So my trick for doing that, okay, to take it down to 1/8 of an inch, you can see I have it on the line here. I want to take 1/8 of an inch off of the whole thing, not 1/8 off of each side, because that would be 1/4 of an inch, and then, no, you're getting into perilous territory. So I lined up the pressed seam on my line here, and then I moved it over, and so I could kind of see it visually, and kind of see it right there where it meets my 1/8 of an inch line, and then I moved it right in the middle, kind of just in between. I'm fortunate with these ones, they have a little, I think this tiny mark does really well at hitting right on it, so I tried to match that up all along as I went. This is a part of the process that you really want to take your time. Like I said, this is the showstopper centerpiece, right? And it has to be as good as you can possibly make it. Take your time. Don't worry. Don't get frustrated. Stretch your shoulders. Relax. Don't do it when you're tired. Okay, so I'd line it up there and then take a pencil. And very importantly, be sure you're doing this on the wrong side. You don't want to accidentally mark the right side and then have to worry about getting it off. I've done that before. I mean, some people have. I don't know who they are. But. So then you just take a pencil and mark it. And you get a nice dark line. And then I would continue to move up the quilt and, unfold it and mark it all the way up the quilt. Turn it around. I turn it around this way. And do the same process, marking on this side. And then, of course, it's all unfolded, so I just want you to see the movements here. And then you do the same thing, measuring from the middle here and marking. So once you have it all marked, before you cut, you want to measure it one more time and make sure that you at least have enough to cover everything. So like this section is big enough. Okay, you don't want to short yourself, like the middle section be perfect and this section be a little bit short. So we're trying to avoid that. If it is short, have it be short by just 1/8 of an inch and you can still make it work. All right, so that you can tackle it. I know you can. Just keep trying and you can get it nice and square and beautiful. So here we have our panel all cut apart. Ooh, I have to tell you, it's still with a little bit of trepidation. I get flashbacks to that time of cutting that quilt and knowing it was going to hang in the shop sample. It was devastating. I was devastated. Okay, so as you cut your pieces apart, and you can see there's the center, right? You want to keep track of which one goes where so you can keep them all in the same shape. I laid them out on the floor, so as I cut each unit, I laid it together. But it's one of those things where you want to keep checking. You don't want to get into your quilt and realize, oh, that's facing the wrong way. It's all wrong. And then you have to rip it out. I try not to rip. And then what you're going to do is you're going to put the sashing in. Now the sashing is a batik, so and it's tighter. It's not going to be as stretchy as this stuff will be. It'll be a little more firm. So that works to our advantage. If you have to adjust the size and stretch a little bit, you can stretch some so that you match the batik, okay? So when you're sewing this, you want to make sure that these sides match and that you're really close, and that'll also help to square up and make things the right size when you're putting it all together. Okay, so you can see I've added the sashing here on the center one. Let me bring up this one here. And I added the sashing here, and then I also added this middle strip. So I have the center sashing and then the strip on the here. Now I want you to notice some things about my strip. This one here in the middle. It looks a little wavy, doesn't it? It's wavy because I've had to stretch these just a little bit to make them go together. But it's not going to stay wavy. When I finish my quilt, it's not going to be wavy. What I'll do, once I get the whole center panel together, the whole center section pieced, is I'll trim it, so if there's stuff hanging off the edges, I'll trim that, and then I will press it, block it, whatever I need to do to get it flat and nice and beautiful. You can take it back to that spot. Okay, so one thing that's really key in here, well, there's a couple things. One, you want to make sure you're going in the right direction. Here's not a time when you want to mix mix things up or get it upside down, that'll change the look of your flower. You can do it if you want to. I don't have a problem with it, but you kind of lose something there. The other issue we have is we need to create a straight line, right? We need to, because your eye is going to follow that. And if it's off a little bit, your eye is going to notice that. Your eye wants it to go straight. It's going to be like, oh, I see you have a mistake there on your quilt. And, and you know, we all have those people that'll point that stuff out to us, don't we? So I have a few tricks to make sure that it lines up nice and straight. I'm going to flip this over. And then I'm going to flip this over as well. Okay. So let's come over here to this section. Now I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to draw a line up through my sashing. Now because it has a little ruffle, right? A little frilliness, I'm kind of going to smooth that out in this piecing section. If you've ever made garment construction, what they do, like if you're going to set in a sleeve or something like that, where something is bigger than the hole you're sewing it into, they use steam and water, and they also, in sections, they piece that section together, one part at a time. So we're going to use that same method here a little bit to make sure that everything's nice and flat and beautiful. All right, so I'm lining my ruler up along my stitching line. See that there? And I'm lining it up all the way through the sashing. I want to make sure it's nice and straight. And then I'm going to take this up here as well, and I want it to extend just a little bit. And I'm going to flatten a little bit. I don't want it wavy. And then I'm going to draw a line. There. Nicely go together. Let me do the second one here. Since I'm coming a little bit different direction, I want to be careful that I don't create a fold, because it's the way the seams are pressed. This kind of wants to sink down in there, but I need to be careful that it doesn't. So I'm lining up right on the stitching line. This is flat out. And I'm going to draw right next to it and make sure that's really accurate. I could turn the whole thing around, or if I was down on the floor, I could rotate myself around, but I'm not going to do that right now. Draw a little bit more. Okay. Now, I'm going to piece these together, and I'm going to take this seam line, and I'm going to pin this sewing line to it. Right there. And on to the next one. Now, the part I was talking about with garment construction, let's look at this here. If these are different sizes, and they are slightly different sizes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stretch this underneath fabric, the panel. I'm going to pin these guys together here. And then, see, when I hold it taut, you see how it kind of all flattens out together? I'm going to hold it taut like that. I'm going to come here into the middle, and I'm going to pin in that middle section. Now, it may not need stretching on the rest of it, but this gives me a section to ease in, like they do in garment making and home deck and stuff. I'm going to ease that part in. Okay, here, look, I made a goof because I didn't stretch it flat. This, I know the inner line is the one I want to follow. If I made that mistake at home, I'd put an X through the top of the first one that I didn't want, or a little squiggle, or maybe a frowny face. I don't know. Put something through there, so that's not the one you want, Jen. This is the one you want. All right, line those up. And let's see how much easing needs to happen there. Oh, maybe just a little bit. It's not as much as the other one. So I'm going to kind of stretch it out here. I'm going to walk there into the middle, and I'm going to put a pin there. And that still bunches up a little bit more than I like. I'm going to put a pin there. And this is the same technique that I do with borders. You know how you are piecing blocks, right? And that's 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.25, 6.5, 6.5. Being able to do something like this with your borders helps pull stuff into the right shape, get it to be the right size. It's your last chance to make everything square. Okay, because I have the feed dogs on there, I'm going to sew with the baggie on the bottom, right? That way the feed dogs will help pull up that extra part. And when I'm sewing, if I need to stretch a little bit, I'll do it. I'll do that and stretch to the next section if I need to, and keep working like that to get it all lined up. Okay, let me sew this together. Okay, so as I'm going, I keep my hand down here where the next pin is. I'm using my hand over here to keep everything nice and taut and straight. And I'm using this hand that's in front to keep everything lined up. And then I'm not letting the machine pull in as much fabric as it wants to. I'm holding it and kind of keeping it back a little bit. So my stitches in these areas might be just a little bit smaller because I'm not letting it feed normally. But that's all right. It's how the finish looks, right? Just stick in the landing, my friend. Just stick the landing. Okay, let's see. Did I do it right? Ah, yay, I did it. I love it, yay. Okay, so you're seeing this ruffly stuff that's here. Don't panic. All we do to take care of that is you just press it out. You press it again, going the spritzing with water. If you need to use some starch, you can, but you just press it out and block it. It's the same thing that I did here, and once you get the whole thing together, again, press it out, block it, and let it dry too. I think that's one trick that sometimes quilters forget. We spritz something and then you iron it, you press it and get it ready to go, but then you move it right away. Well, fabric is its most malleable when it's wet and heated up, and you can really distort something. But if you have this in exactly the right shape and position that you want it, and it's pressed and everything, let it cool down. Just leave it there. You know, it's kind of like some people, you just walk away from that conversation until they cool down. And then you can come back and deal with it. All right, so then you would add, after you get the last section on, then you would add the sides and the top, the sashing. Be sure to press it really well before you go on to the next step. Okay, next episode we are going to put together, I'm going to show you how to finish up the whole thing. We'll do the quilt assembly, and I have some interesting things that I've learned about the different flowers and different flower meanings for the flowers that we've used here in this quilt. So be sure to join me. I'll see you next time. This episode of Dream Big Block of the Month is brought to you by Hoffman Fabrics, made to inspire since 1924.